Welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Hello, dear audience. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Micro. As always, I hope you had a great week. And you can always find Let's Talk Micro on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Pandora, Goodpods, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find Let's Talk Micro. As far as social media, I am on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as Let's Talk Micro, on X as Let's Talk Micro 1, on LinkedIn as Luis Plaza, and I have an email address which is letstalkmicro@outlook.com. So either via social media or via email, you can reach out with any topic suggestions, any feedback. They are always welcome and appreciated. So please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, download episodes, and if the app allows you to do so, please go ahead and leave a review. Thank you so much for the support. And as you know, the Let's Talk Micro podcast does not have any sponsors. So if you want to support the podcast in any way, you can do so via a Venmo link or via buying a coffee, ko-fi, both links available on the show notes. And of course, if you are looking to learn more about antibiotics, please check out www.learnantibiotics.com and the Learn Antibiotics book available on Amazon. These resources include cheat sheets, practice tests, games, and more, and they are being used by thousands of people worldwide and may be helpful for you or your colleagues. Great resources from Dr. Timothy Gauthier, a very passionate pharmacist. And if you haven't checked out the previous episode, please go ahead and do so. In the episode, Grace Luberg, she's the director of the MLS program at the University of Alaska in Anchorage, and she joined the podcast and she was talking about her program, her curriculum. And of course, I asked about micro, what are they teaching? And she's very passionate. I love what she's doing. She's really providing those students with a lot of knowledge and a lot of that rich biochemicals, organisms. So in micro, they're really learning a lot. And one of the things that, she talked a little bit about the research project that she does, and that is something that's going to be in a separate episode. So tune in for that. Stay tuned. But overall, it was a great episode. It was great chatting with Grace. As I said, she's so passionate. So definitely, I invite you to check it out. And you can learn a little bit about the MLS program at the University of Alaska in Anchorage. Well, let's go ahead and talk about today's episode. It is a little longer than most episodes. As you know, sometimes, I try to stay between 20 to 30 minutes. This one is an hour. But it is great content. So sometimes, they turn out like that. But it was a great conversation with Duane Newton. And in the episode, and this is something that I originally heard him speak at a conference in Jacksonville, the First Coast Infectious Diseases Conference, the symposium that is held every year around, sometimes it varies. It's like Jacksonville, St. Augustine in Florida. But he was one of the speakers and he was sharing his story, how he navigated his path, and that's actually the name of his talk. And, Duane talks about that. Like he got his PhD, he did a CPEP fellowship, which we talked a little bit in the ABMM episode. And he was working as a director in the lab in microbiology. And then he talks about, some feelings that he started having. And he describes it as being miserable. And he talks about his path and how he finally decided to take some steps and his whole journey. And he offers advice and he even, he does some consulting. And you can find more information in the show notes. But it is very interesting and to see how similar, we all are, our humanity. And a lot of us, we experience things like this. And sometimes, we are at a job that we're not happy about it. We want to try something different. And I actually, in the episode, I shared a little bit about my story. So I really enjoyed talking to Duane. I hope you enjoy it as well. Great episode. Let's go ahead and listen to it. As medical laboratory scientists, sometimes we might be in a job that maybe we don't like it. We are not feeling happy. Maybe we want something different. And this is something that applies to other jobs, other careers. So a few months ago, I was at a conference in Jacksonville and I was listening to this speaker talk about his journey. And I decided to, I liked what he was saying and I decided to reach out and he accepted. So here today in Let's Talk Micro, we have a guest that he's going to talk about his journey. He's going to offer some advice. So here we have Duane Newton. Duane, welcome to Let's Talk Micro.
Thanks, Luis. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time. So for the audience, maybe we can start with a quick introduction, telling them what you do and anything else that you want to share.
Sure. Right now, I'm a business owner. I started my own consulting and coaching business, DWN Consulting, last year in July. And that follows a long career as a clinical microbiology lab director. I spent 20 years in public health and academic medical centers running clinical micro labs. Most recently, I was at the University of Michigan. I've spent about 18 years there in Ann Arbor. I left in 2020. We can talk about kind of that process. Started working as a consultant, helping diagnostic manufacturers in their product development. Worked for Bio-Rad for a little bit of time as a scientific affairs manager, and ultimately decided to start my own company. And much of what we're going to talk about today is what led me to go down that path and be in this role that I have right now.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so my question was going to be, and I have a couple questions here. So because I know when I was listening to the talk, you start listing your professional background, and we start healing, listening to that, and then at the same time, you talk about that you were feeling miserable at that point in your life. So can you maybe for the audience, expand a little bit on your background and then those feelings?
Sure. Yeah, it didn't start out feeling miserable. I started out, I got my PhD in biology and did postdoc training in microbiology and ultimately a clinical microbiology fellowship. And I went down that path and really enjoyed the patient care aspects of the fellowship, and um, moved into director roles, first in a public health lab and then at the University of Michigan, as I said, and went through that and learned a lot, experienced a lot of things. But about halfway through my time at Michigan, I started feeling like there was more out there for me, and I didn't quite understand what I was feeling. Um, and the more I went down that road and felt like there was more, the less happy I was in my, in that current role. And it was a very difficult process to go through, because, you look at that resume, with the PhD and fellowship program at a CPEP fellowship, job at a very well recognized academic institution. Objectively, you look at it and think that's the perfect job, and that's exactly where everyone would want to be. And I thought that way too. But what I realized that it was what I felt like I was supposed to be doing. And the further I went down that road, um, the less positive about it, and the more of those negative feelings started to bubble up, and I didn't really understand it. It didn't, my logical head said this is exactly what you're supposed to be doing, but I had these feelings that were bubbling up. I felt uninspired. I didn't feel connected to the work as much as I felt like I should. I didn't feel connected to people in the environment, and um, that I did feel miserable. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to go into work, and that's really hard. We're taking care of patients. This is a really important job. I think, logically I could look at it and say, yes, this is really important work, and I really need to care. And it just took a lot of effort to do that. And that told me something was wrong, and I couldn't quite figure it out. But that happened, sort of midway through my time at Michigan.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And a lot of times, it can be easy for us to to step in and say, hey, we're feeling something, and the way you did it at the talk, and so it was great, and it makes us stop and think for a moment that maybe we don't think about it. And for example, us in the lab, sometimes, we're working the long hours, we're we're swamped with cultures, and we don't think about, when we think about our director, right? We think about the person that has the answers, the final answers, the person that we consult, that culture, that, oh yeah, they're not sitting here swamping the bench. They come in, they answer a question, they go away, and we don't give it much thought. It's just, but we know we're all human. We all have these feelings, and we're experiencing the same thing. So it's just kind of eye opening, and it makes us think for a moment. Um, so I know. So we're saying that you gave a backstory which involved, you were listening to a speaker, and you talk about that. Can you talk a little bit more about that here, please?
Sure. Yeah. I think, you know, to dovetail on what you just said, I think one of the things that we do forget sometimes is when we're doing these jobs that everybody brings something in their life to their work. Everybody has a story that's going on. They have ups and downs as well. And it doesn't matter what position you're in and what role you're in, what your responsibilities are. And that's something that is easy to lose sight of, especially when we're so worked up and, we're concentrating on our work, or we have our own issues and challenges that we're dealing with. It's hard to recognize that others are dealing with that too. And so I think that was certainly something over time that I came to recognize, that as I was dealing with things and struggling, that others are dealing with things and struggling too. And it gave me more empathy and awareness to what the situation that others were dealing with. The aha moment was, as the situation that you described, it wasn't unlike the situation you were in when we were in Jacksonville and I was giving the presentation. I was sitting in the audience, and the speaker at the presentation I attended was talking about professional development and personal development. And he talked about what it feels like when you're not doing the things that are really, what you're meant to be doing, where you feel like where you're in your element. And when you're not in your element, or he described when you're in your element, how time flies, how it doesn't feel like work, how it gives you energy. And I realized, as he started describing that I wasn't feeling those feelings. And then he described what it feels like when you're not in your element, when you feel disconnected and time drags and minutes feel like hours, and your level of engagement and enthusiasm is low, and it actually drains you of energy. It doesn't give you energy. And I realized that's how I felt. And it was a pretty dramatic, it literally was an aha moment. I'm sitting there in the audience and I realized I wasn't in my element. I wasn't doing what I felt like I needed to be doing. I felt immediately that I needed to make a change, that there were a lot of things in my life that were not going the way I wanted them to. And then almost immediately, I also realized that was going to take a lot of work, and it scared me tremendously. But that immediate reaction was something has to change. A lot of things have to change. And then almost immediately, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? It seemed overwhelming and scary.
I'm sure like the audience can also identify with this, and we have experienced some part of this, at one point or another. And I know like in some jobs, I have experienced that, when I have that feeling and it seemed like the hours just dragged, and you feel, yeah, you experience some things like that. I like how you mentioned, before I jump to the next question, about the empathy, and I'll share some thoughts later down the podcast. But I know that that's something that I think on a personal level, maybe it took me a while to get that. I mean, I came when I was 18 years old. I joined the military, So I come from so I did a job where it was, very strict, very disciplined. So you just get it done and you don't think about anything else. You follow your orders. And then maybe some of that translated as I started progressing in my career and becoming a supervisor. And it wasn't until I went through a very difficult experience where I finally started to understand, and now I'm able to better, have that empathy towards others, and maybe identify more with those feelings that we all experience. So you decide that it was time to take action and find your path. So what do you do to find it?
To put it in perspective, the things where I am now has taken 10 years, and 10 years of work and energy. And there's been a lot of time, a lot of people that have been involved, a lot of emotions in that process. And so in the good thing, the good position that I'm in now is to be able to look back on that and reflect and think about what has been important to me in that process, and what has helped me get to where I am now. And I felt like it was important to put some structure around that for the reasons that you've said several times. That a lot of people are going through these same things, and you feel these feelings and you don't know where they're coming from, and you don't know what to do about them, and you don't know what it means. And the idea of making a change, if you get to that point and say, something needs to happen differently, that can be overwhelming too. What does that look like? It's the scary feelings that I felt are the same that a lot of people will feel. I have a family, I have young kids, I have responsibilities, I have bills to pay, house payments, and I have a lab and people that are counting on me. And the work is important. And this story is not about me feeling like laboratory medicine or clinical microbiology is not an important job, that it doesn't have value. That can be farther from the truth. I have been and will continue to be a huge proponent and advocate for what we do in the laboratory, and the value that it brings to the patient. I knew, though, at the time when I had that aha moment, that I wasn't doing things that were fulfilling to me, and I had to figure out how to find that fulfillment. And the first step along the way was to really recognize that those feelings inside of me were telling me something. And I'd had feelings like that for a while, but I wasn't listening to them. And I had this logical idea, like I said, of what I was supposed to be doing and the direction I was supposed to be going. But those feelings kept popping up. And so the first lesson that I had to learn was to listen to those feelings and get out of my head and into my heart and listen to what my heart and my gut were telling me about where I was, and potentially where I needed to go. And so that really the emotional aspects of things was really important to recognize, that my gut was telling me something. And as I started to become more aware of that and listen to that, I started asking myself a lot of questions. What do I like? What don't I like? Where do I think I might find myself? And that, helping me answer those questions, always when I had them in my life, I always reached out to others and started having conversations with people that I respected and maybe saw as mentors. And so that was the second part of it, was connecting with people that are important guides, were important guides to me in the process. I started talking to a lot of people within the organization, people in clinical leadership roles, people in research leadership roles, administrative leadership roles, trying to find something in those conversations that clicked or resonated with me. And it gave me a lot of really valuable information, but it wasn't pointing me as much in a direction as I thought. And the things that they were saying were really important and really helpful. But I felt like I needed more. And so that the lesson that it taught me was, to find people like that can be your guide. Another term I like to use is wayfinder. Wayfinders are people, they help shine a light on the path that you need to take, but the path that you decide is one that you decide. It's not something that they can tell you. And I think when I started having those conversations, I was looking for them to tell me what to do and what I need, the route I needed to take, and kind of lay it out for me on a silver platter. And that's not how things work. And I think I was probably even more frustrated when I got done talking to a lot of those folks. And that led me to the next lesson that I learned, which was following my intuition. Like, you can listen to people, but really your heart, your values, what's important to you is it's kind of like the compass that you follow that tells you the direction that you need to go. And so, you listen to that voice inside of you, you can get confirmation or perspectives from other people, but that intuition helps you know that you're aligned and going down a path that makes sense, that is really resonating with who you are authentically. And that took a lot of time for me to develop, to get to this point where I really felt comfortable listening to that voice, that I was able to identify people that I really could use as wayfinders. I made the decision to actually hire a career coach at that time when I wasn't feeling like I was getting the kind of feedback that I really wanted. I hired a career coach. I was very committed to my personal therapy sessions. I felt like that was a really important part of this process for me, taking care of my mental health. I started working with someone who I feel like is more of a spiritual coach. So dealing with some of that emotional aspects, and spiritual aspects of things that are important to me. And so all of those people have had an impact on me and helped me start to see, okay, this is how my compass is working, and this is how these are the kinds of things that I think I need to be doing. And it started pushing me outside of my box and outside of my comfort zone. And that was the next step. So, the first is get out of your head, get into your heart, listen to your heart, find those trusted advisors. The third, but you still need to follow your intuition, and your intuition starts pushing you. It's time to take risks. It's time to get out of your comfort zone. And really what I learned was taking risks was the key to growth. It helped me to see that I had more that I could do, more that I was capable of doing. It didn't, taking risks is still scary. You don't always things don't always work out the way you want them to. But from those experiences, you learn a lot. And I think that's really important. I'm happy to tell the story that I told about taking risks if you feel like that fits in as well.
Yes, please.
That I've always been kind of athletic, and during this time I started getting more involved with cycling and running more seriously. And I decided to join a local triathlon club because they did cycling workouts that were of interest to me. I wanted to do more road cycling. And the more I started hanging out with those folks, the more bike riding and running I was doing, the more they encouraged me or pushed me to try doing a triathlon. But I knew that I couldn't, I could swim, but I wasn't a very good swimmer. And I certainly had never swam in a lake before. And so the idea of doing a race and swimming in a lake with a bunch of people was terrifying to me. That I was kind of interested in it enough to decide to try to work on it. And so I worked on my swimming and eventually got to a point where I was ready to try to swim in a lake. And I remember standing on the dock at the lake and looking at this lake and just being really terrified. And but I also realized, if I was ever going to do a triathlon, I had to jump in. I had to take that risk and see, and the first time I jumped in, I swam a little ways, maybe about 100 yards, and turned around and came back to the dock. And I was anxious and excited and exhilarated and happy. Okay, I didn't drown. And so I turned around and went out a little bit further and also didn't drown and made it back. And, kind of did that same thing, every week, and went a little bit further and a little bit further, and eventually was able to swim all the way back and forth across the lake, which was a mile in total. And as I went through that and continued to have, these small successes and could build on them and see, that taking that risk allowed me to actually accomplish something, I started to feel like I could do more of that, that taking risks yielded a lot of really wonderful things. And in what that swimming experience showed me, or gave me the opportunity to experience wonderful times with friends, sitting around and watching the sun go down over this beautiful lake every week, and having a few beers and some pizza and just making friends. And if I hadn't have jumped in the lake and really pushed myself to take that risk, I would have never experienced those things. And ultimately went on and have done a lot of different races and met a lot of people and been to some wonderful places because of that. And that whole experience really, in taking that risk of jumping in the lake, has become a metaphor for me in my life, and what the value of taking risks is all about. You still feel that anxiety, when you look at whatever that lake is, and that emotional experience is, whatever that is for you, it still causes anxiety. And you get over that, and by resilience, by trying, doing a little bit at a time, celebrating those small successes, learning from the perceived failures. And that helps you become stronger. It helps you grow, and it helps provide that realization that, taking risks is really important. And, I think it's really easy for me and many of us to go down the path that we know. We see it, it's very well worn. We know where all the curves are. We know where the ups and downs are, and there's comfort in that. But sometimes you have to get off that path. Sometimes you have to get into the weeds where it's not really clear. And sometimes you get into these thorny bushes where it hurts to get off the path, but you gain a lot from that. You learn a lot, and maybe you learn that that alternative path isn't the right path. But as you listen to your heart, you get the kind of advice from people that are really important wayfinders to you. You listen to your intuition, and you continue to build on your experiences of taking risks. You're going to find new paths to take, and that ultimately leads to the last thing that I think is probably as important, if not most important in all of this, is to have fun while you're doing it. This is we're living this life, and there's so much that we're dealing with, that if you're not having fun, if you're not enjoying the process, if you're not finding the joy in these little things, even the things that are perceived as failures, seeing the learning opportunities, seeing the opportunities that present themselves when an obstacle pops up. What can I learn from this? What's the silver lining? What's a new way or new perspective? Those are really important things to remember. And sometimes it's as simple, I was on a bike ride yesterday with some friends, and it was cold and gray. We went from 80 degrees to 50 degrees in a couple of days, but we were out on this bike ride and rode past this field of fresh wildflowers. It just so beautiful. And I've been past it many times. And every spring, these wildflowers pop up. And it is something that I look forward to every year. And just took some time to sit and look and take some pictures and remember different days that I've ridden by there when it's been hot and sunny and cold and rainy, and how fortunate I felt to be out there with my friends and be able to do that and experience that. Those are the kinds of things that I feel like this whole journey has allowed me to be able to take that time and appreciate and recognize the good things that I have, the wonderful people that I have in my life, and the great things that I get to do.
Well said, definitely. And we talked about some of these things when we were chatting and back in the conference in Jacksonville, and definitely, yeah. Sometimes you take risk, and sometimes they don't work out, and then you learn from those experiences. And I think that I went through a situation like that where I was trying to kind of find out where in the lab and what to do, and I took some chances, and unfortunately one of those experiences it wasn't good at all. And I do remember those feelings of feeling like like you're sitting in the car before you go into work, and your stomach just hurts, and you get through your day and those 8 hours, and maybe you feel some relief when when it's time to go home, and then night comes and you're like, okay, once I go to sleep and I wake up, starts all over again. And then the dread sets in, and Sunday night, once again, it's just running full, and you're feeling it. And I remember those so vividly, and trying to apply for all the jobs. And when you get that email, you have not been selected for this. So you're kind of stuck in that position. And then, my heart will drop. And it was just, oh my God, that was a very dark time for me. And then from there, I had to find something else, and I ended up doing it. And I found my way back in micro, in the place that I had left. But then, I took a risk with this, what I'm doing right now, which was definitely getting out of my comfort zone. And we talked about this, I am a huge introvert. So this is me coming out of my shell, and this is one of the things that I enjoy the most. And this and teaching. I really do, talking to people. Never did I think, years ago that I will be chatting with different microbiologists and people from different parts of the country and the world. And I enjoy it. Yes, I still get that little bit of anxiety right before I press the start recording on the Zoom, and I see the guest in person. That doesn't go away, maybe in some degree, but I still get it. And but yeah, and then when I go to conferences, sometimes it gets a little bit draining, when you're talking to that much people, but still, I love it. It's it was a great decision.
When you were, I have a question for you. So you talked about being in roles where you had that anxiety and you felt that disconnection, and didn't want to get out of the car to go in. What kept you going forward as far as continuing to push to find your place? I mean, do you remember how you were approaching that emotionally? What kinds of things were you telling yourself? What kinds of encouragement were you giving yourself to keep moving forward?
Well, I have to say one big thing that I was fortunate enough to at that point in time, and this is something that I have never, talked to the audience about, but talking to my mom, like I had some conversations with her every day, and that used to calm me a little bit, and then I would just call her, and we'll talk for hours, and unfortunately, in 2022, she passed away from cancer, and that's another thing, but definitely she helped me through that time, and it just, I made that decision to take that risk, that particular risk. It was in February of 2020. So you imagine that I go to this brand new place, and then COVID hits, changes, the world is changing. And then, so it was just, it was a tough time. And I think also, I mean, I don't know, I think I'm always in my very nature, I'm always, I know I can keep an eye kind of on the long picture and say, okay, this is just going to be temporary. As of right now, I have to find another job, get myself out of the situation. And then once things are a little bit calm and I'm able to think, then I take my next step. And that's what I did. I think I mean, even when I was in the military and sometimes, it seemed like I wasn't too happy at the time or things like that. I'm like, no, this is not going to be forever. I'm going to finish this. I'm going to go to school and continue my life. But for this, it's just a matter of the time. Just I need to find a position, and I did. And ultimately, I'm not there anymore. But it just kind of gave me a little bit time to think, and I started rethinking some stuff and thinking, okay, maybe I should continue going to school. So I made that decision. I went ahead and enrolled for my master's in microbiology, which I'll be finishing in December. And I also decided, it's like, well, I like teaching, and I always had kind of like some sort of idea to share information. So I'm like, let's just did the research and let's launch the podcast. And this actually was one of the things that this whole process, just carried me through the whole, to the next years, and it really made me, I don't know, feel a lot better. But so I will say those things.
I That's wonderful, and thank you for having the courage to share some things that are emotionally difficult to talk about. And that vulnerability I really appreciate. And it's interesting to hear your story, because there's so much overlap between the approaches that you took and the things that I talk about too. I think you could feel something wasn't right, and then when you started listening to those feelings, you realized you needed to make a change. And importantly, your mom was a huge wayfinder for you in this process. And the having those people that you can really trust and share everything that you're thinking about is really, really important. And you started taking risks. You started trying different things. You started looking at different options. And there were always things, I'm sure, that had a little bit of interest to you. But maybe, the podcast is something that is like, you see an opportunity for yourself to grow. And if that is going to happen, here's some things that I want to do. I want to get out and put myself in front of people. I want to learn a bunch of things about microbiology that I don't know about. And and I get to meet some really cool people while I'm doing that, and so all of those things that just by taking that risk and you getting out of your comfort zone. I'm introverted too. It's hugely difficult for me to be in new situations with new people. I'm much more comfortable where I know people, or I feel like I have some, what's the word, credibility. I feel like I have some credibility and um so it's easier now to get up in front of an audience and talk about something scientific because I've done it a million times. It's much harder for me to get up and talk about my emotions and how I felt about where I was in my career. It was really scary to give that talk in Jacksonville. But those kinds of things are what helps us grow. And I feel like there's a lot of alignment in how we've approached things. And it doesn't surprise me because I think that all those things are really important for people. And it's put me being willing to do that, being able to identify those steps has put me in a place where I feel much more comfortable, much more content now.
Yes. And one thing also, just real quick with the introverts, and unfortunately, sometimes it seems that we might get a reputation that we're not friendly, or just because we feel uncomfortable with the situation. And I'm always like to just tell people, so anyone in the audience, if you see me out there, just talk to me and I'll be fine. It's just like I'm sometimes, I tend to be a little quiet and I sit in a situation, I listen and I absorb everything, and sometimes I think a lot before I say something. So it's not that I don't like people, that I'm not friendly. It's just it's a process.
Yeah, I think my introversion manifests itself in a very similar way. I feel more comfortable with small groups or one-on-one interactions. As I get to know people more, it is easier for me to engage. I I think a good definition of introversion versus extroversion that I heard that, and I really believe, is that being around people tends to um, ultimately drain an introvert, and so being alone is recharging. And for extroverts, being with people is recharging. And it's interesting because I kind of fall a little bit in between, but tend to definitely feel like if I've been out and engaged and putting on an extroverted self for a long period of time, that I need to get some quiet time and be by myself to recharge. So I think that's been an important part of this process for me, and understanding who I am, where I'm coming from, that self-awareness, what my strengths are, where my weaknesses are, has helped me also be able to understand and appreciate where other people are coming from, the differences that differences in personality or approach or perspectives that other people have. And that's been an important part in the process as well, that becoming more self-aware has helped me be more other aware, aware of others and what they bring, and the strengths and values and approaches that all kinds of people with all different personalities and life experiences and cultures that they bring to our world and our work lives, that how important that is. So that's, without looking and understanding really myself, it didn't give me as great an awareness of all those unique things in others as I think I thought I had.
And and one thing I like on the presentation that you say also that so now today, right, you are not miserable anymore. So you're feeling okay. So how are you? And you're doing some coaching, right?
I sure am. And that going through those steps and really being true to that process has put me in this place now where I decided to start my coaching business. And it wasn't an easy process to get here either. I made it I made a decision in January of 2020 that I was going to leave my clinical lab director job. And then COVID hit and it changed those plans. And so I ended up staying in the lab through that first wave, through the summer and into the fall. And it didn't push me out. It didn't make me leave, but it just reinforced the reasons that I felt like it was time for me to move in a different direction. And I started working as a consultant, helping diagnostic manufacturers develop the products that we use in the lab. And I did that for a year. And I enjoyed the flexibility, but I also felt uncomfortable with the uncertainty because you don't really know, where your next client is coming from. And I wasn't comfortable in that. I had a steady, secure faculty position, and I went completely 180 degrees away from that. And, independent contractor consultant. And I had a number of things happen that kind of made me think about the situation that I was in, and I've been working with Bio-Rad as they were a client of mine for that year, and ended up getting a position with them and working with them in the company as a scientific affairs manager and help them with product development. And I really enjoyed that. It was something I'd always thought about, over the years. I'd had, when I was going through and trying to think of what are some different options and different directions that I wanted to take. Industry was certainly one of them, but none of the roles felt right, and the organizations just didn't feel like the right match. And this one did. And I really enjoyed the people. I enjoyed the projects I was working on, the products I was supporting. But ultimately, it felt a lot, just from an organizational standpoint, it felt like the big organization that I've been in before, and that wasn't aligning with me. And I really had to take a step back and think about what do I really want to do? Who do I really want to be? And that's where the coaching business really came up. It started several years earlier when I had talked with my coach that I had hired. This coaching, mentoring, advising, guiding role that I've had over my career, as a faculty member, as a senior lab director. I've had that role for other people, and I've really, really enjoyed it. As a teacher, I really enjoy teaching students and mentoring them. And so that was something that I felt very passionate about, and felt like, really when I was doing those kinds of things, that's when I'm in my element. And so I decided to start a company to do that. And, so each of those things, there's more risks, there's more jumping in the lake that I've been doing over this time. You can't get away from it. I had to take a risk to leave U of M. I had to take a risk to get a company job. I had to take a risk to leave a company job and start my own business. It's probably the biggest risk I've ever taken in my life. And it's not easy. There are lots of ups and downs for it, and so having this clarity about what the process is it makes some things easier, but it doesn't make the path any less bumpy. You still have ups and downs. I'm doing things that are really new to me. Being a business owner of a startup requires a lot of patience, requires a lot of thought. It requires a lot of investment of time and energy and financial resources. And I know every conversation I have with a person in that kind of coaching environment I know it's exactly what I'm meant to be doing. It's why I'm here. I feel totally connected to people. I love making those connections. I love helping them figure out, what path they want to be on. And the people that I work with have lots of different questions. Some of them, might have been like you were, I know I'm not happy and I need to make a change, but I have no idea how to do it. I don't have any idea where to go. Some people are very happy where they are in their environment, but they feel like there's more that it could be. And they want to maximize, the opportunities that they have. They want to take advantage of the resources that are available and really develop. Other people have a very clear path that they want to take. I'm starting here and I want to move through these steps and get to this point so that I can do X, Y, or Z. And I'm working with them to help make sure that they're addressing all of the things that that are important to address at each step along the way, at each point of advancement. Some of those interactions are in the context of one-on-one coaching relationships. Also have a leadership development program that we put together. And one of my recent wayfinders is now a business partner. Amy Weisner and I have known each other for many years, and she's an expert in communication and marketing. And I went to her to help me figure out the message and how to articulate this message. These are all the feelings that I feel inside of me, but I didn't know how to get them out and how to put them out in front of people in a way that might, excite them and encourage them to want to work with me. And the more we started working together and the more we were growing this message together, the more I realized that we needed to be partners. And so we're developing this process and develop this year-long coaching program together. And the thing that it does, not only is it give people the opportunity to spend time on that self-awareness work and figure out how to communicate more effectively with their staff and with their boss and across their institution, but they're also doing that in community with other people that are, just like them, that are dealing with the same issues that they are and the same struggles. And I think that's been the most beautiful thing about this is that, yeah, I can establish one-on-one relationships with people, but what I really love to see is how I have the opportunity to bring other people together with each other that weren't necessarily connected, and they can connect, they can establish relationships, they can develop personally and professionally and benefit from not only what Amy and I are sharing, but also, what their peers are sharing. And that's a beautiful and powerful thing. And I think, one of the things that was so challenging through COVID was how disconnected we all became. We immediately were sent into our little bubbles. And, in the lab, we had to be there, we needed to be there. But it was a different experience and a different way of working together. We actually, in my old lab, we split our teams into two teams from a infection prevention standpoint. We didn't want to have an outbreak happen in the lab and knock everybody out. And so we started working on alternate work schedules and had a maize team and a blue team, maize and blue for Michigan, but we had separate work groups. And, so we didn't see the same people all the time. And I was working a lot from home. And, a lot of our target audience are really young, early career lab directors who did their training, did their fellowship programs through COVID, did their first interviews and got their first jobs through COVID. And, we didn't have the opportunity to go to professional meetings and see people and connect people and expand our network, and are struggling with making those connections again. And the things that we're doing is really helping to create those connections for people and create community and bring people together that are really interested in growing, spending the time and energy and looking inward and developing themselves so that they can be the best version of themselves that they aspire to be. That's why I'm here. That's what I want to be doing. And that's why I'm so happy now, because I get to do that. I get to benefit from seeing other people grow and being a part of that. It's I said the word beautiful, and it's just amazing. I really love it. And I feel very fortunate that I've gotten to this place.
Definitely happy to hear you say that. And yeah, I definitely have one thing as I enjoy, like, as you talk about connections, and one thing out of the podcast is I met so many people, and building those connections, and so many wonderful people out there, definitely, which you learn so much from them, and so it's been great. I think, as you talk about the people that you've been helping, and yeah, with me, I remember a point in time where it was all I wanted to do was just get to the micro lab and read cultures and get really proficient with the organisms, and then once I started getting maybe to that point, then something else is like, well, I think I can do a little bit more, and that's where I think a lot of my journey starts, with always wanting to do a little bit more and trying to find how to get there, and making different decisions throughout my career. And then some people maybe in the audience, they might be thinking, because I also met some people that they're very content, right, with just they have a job and they're like, okay, well, it may, with this I can afford my travels or do other things, and they do their 8-12 hours, no sweat, and then they get out into the world and do their thing, and they're completely happy. But for me, it's just that space, that time that you're spending there, it has to feel meaningful, because you're putting 40 hours, you're putting more than that, and it's just, if you don't feel that it's fulfilling, then I say, the time drags by, and it's just, to me, that's something that's very important, that I have to feel good when I'm doing that job. And then, of course, take the time to enjoy life and do other things, but that's something that's very important to me.
I totally agree. And I think that's an important point to make, is that you being happy and content and comfortable, that's really important. And not everybody wants to or needs to push for more. And it doesn't, or push for different. It's not that it's more or less, it's, different. And I give you a lot of credit, and I'm really happy to hear, that you've, when you felt like you wanted different, and you wanted, really that there was different opportunities that you felt like were out there for you, that you were willing to put in that energy to figure out what those are. And, different people handle those, coming to those crossroads or feeling those feelings in a different way. And it's not, choosing to stay in a certain situation, whether it's personally or professionally, because of whatever roles or responsibilities or commitments you feel like you need to fulfill. That's totally fine. And that's where you are, and that's your choice. And I think it's important to recognize it. You're making that choice and you're in control. And I'm really happy to hear and proud of you for putting in that energy, putting in that effort, and making those changes when you felt like you needed to.
Thank you for that. And if the listeners perhaps they wanted to check out more about find out more about what you're doing, is there a website that they can look or a way to contact you?
Yeah, sure. And the best thing to do is to go to my business website, and that's www.dwnconsult.com. That's all one word, dwnconsult.com. And it has information about me as a coach, has information about me as a consultant and working with diagnostic manufacturers. On the contact page, there are ways to set up appointments with me to just chat if someone is interested in having more of a one-on-one conversation, learning more about what I do. I have some other resources available as well online, but I think that's the best place to start right now. And just going to see, where people are in their journey, and if there's something that they have questions about, maybe I can help.
Perfect. And for the listeners, you can find the link on the show notes if you want to go ahead and check it out. Well, Duane, is there anything else that you want to tell the audience?
I just really appreciate the opportunity to chat and tell my story. I really appreciate that you shared some of your story too for people, and that helps everyone to connect more with us as people, and that's a really powerful thing. I think that just to go back and reiterate the steps that were important for me. The first thing was listening to my heart, getting out of my head, and really recognizing those feelings. I found and continue to have a group of people that are my wayfinders, that are my trusted individuals that I go to. It has changed over time. And I'm sure there are going to be new people that come in, but those people are really important. They provide a lot of guidance for you, but thirdly, your intuition, your gut is going to tell you what was the right thing for you to do. And it's going to push you to start going in directions where you take some risks. And so that fourth thing is that taking risks are really the key to growth as an individual. And following that process is really important, but also having fun along the way, and seeing the joy and happiness, and just be a kid, get out there, sing, dance, whatever it is, have fun, enjoy life. It's short, and you just want to take it as much advantage of it as you can.
I like that. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and share your story. I think I really like hearing it, and sometimes it makes us feel like, okay, here's someone that's kind of that went through something similar, and it's just not me. I think that sometimes, especially in a more personal level, like with my background and like I came back, like my family growing up, we didn't have much. So sometimes, when you have a job and you have something good and you're paying your bills, you're like, okay, what's there to complain about? That's part of a little bit of the culture. So, but yeah, when there's sometimes, we want something different. And so I really enjoy listening to you. And once again, I appreciate you taking the time to being on Let's Talk Micro.
Thanks, Luis. I really enjoyed it. Enjoyed the conversation. Appreciate the opportunity.
My pleasure. And that, my dear audience, it's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed listening to Duane Newton. As always, I enjoy sharing this information with you. It is so important if you want to try something different, if you're having those feelings and maybe you're not satisfied with what you do. Find some steps, take some steps and try to change that. It is very important. Life is precious and we need to be feeling our best, right? So try to take those steps. Try to find a different job or pursue another career or something that makes you happier, and let that spread to other parts of your life too. Right? Pursue happiness. As always, continue bringing that passion to what you do. It's so important. You do such great work. And remember, if you're attending Microbe this year in Atlanta, I'm looking forward to meeting you. So if you see me, you recognize me, say hi. We would love to connect. And also, stay tuned to social media. If you're attending Microbe on the CPHM Track Hub, which is the Clinical Public Health Microbiology Track Hub, on Friday, June 14th, from 4 to 4:55 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Dr. Andrea Princey, my co-host from the AMR series, and Dr. Nicholas Moore, they will be there, and I will also be attending. So if you want to stop by, listening to them, connect, and ask me questions about episodes or anything that you possibly want to be a guest, or you just want to touch base, I'll be there. So I'm looking forward to meeting you. As always, stay motivated, stay safe, and of course, continue talking micro. Until the next time. Bye.